Hello, everyone. Thanks for stopping by today's podcast episode on abundant life assessment or abundant living assessment. Maybe I should say that. So I wanted to do something a little bit different for today's podcast episode because I know I talk a lot about success and personal growth and leadership and influence and how the choices that we make help us, increase our influence and develop our leadership and maximize results. But I want to take a step back for this episode and just share something with you because I think it's important as we move forward toward however we define success. I love to just take a step back sometimes and look at the big picture of life. And that's where the whole assessment comes into. So I wanted to share with you today just sort of what I use as a tool for reflection and life assessment, and not just life assessment, right? I love the verse in John 10:10 that talks about Jesus is saying, I come that you can have life and have it more abundantly. And I love that because it's a reminder that it's not, we don't want to just be going through the motions day to day. We want an abundant life, a life that's filled with purpose and meaning and joy. And that's where the whole concept for my abundant life assessment came in. Now, I like to teach this assessment or offer this assessment sometimes with my coaching clients, but also when I talk about time management and balancing priorities and things like that, because you really can't manage time. You have to manage yourself within the time that you have based on where you want to go. So I like to offer this life assessment with that perspective a lot of times. And I always have to share there's no right or wrong answers. When you go through an assessment like this, it's simply an awareness tool to help you identify some of the areas of your life where you are satisfied and maybe some areas of your life that you want to bring some positive changes to. It's just an awareness exercise. No right or wrong answers, no grade, no score, no really reason to feel like you don't measure up. It's just simply between you and you. It's a conversation of, am I really feeling abundant in this dimension of my life? So I wanted to walk you through a couple of these assessment uh, questions, for lack of a better word, in each of the four dimensions of life. So we'll go through a couple for spiritual, physical, mental, and of course, social, relational. And if you want to, if you're following along or listening to the podcast, you absolutely can download this. It's on my website, so you don't have to put your email in or join a list or anything like that. You can just go to my website and download this for free. If you just go to riastory.com/time management. And if you go to that website page, you'll see kind of over on the left, there's a button that said download Ria's personal life assessment worksheet. So there, it's just available free. You don't have to put an email in. You just go and download this. And certainly you can follow along. I'll share some of the questions with you, but it might be something to go download and work on this weekend or during your journaling time or reflection time, and just as a tool, just check in with yourself. And are you really feeling abundant in every area of life? And if not, maybe that's an area where you want to bring some positive changes to, some effort to, as we move into the new year coming in. It always is natural, right? As we feel the year drawing to a close, we feel the momentum of the new year coming. It's natural time to set some goals for ourselves, or maybe just reorient ourselves in growth in one particular dimension of life. Now, absolutely, I think that when we do an assessment tool like this, we might notice that maybe there are a couple different areas of our lives that we want to make some positive changes to, have some growth in, and that's okay. I think it's absolutely possible to have more than one area of life that you really want to bring some positive focus to and some growth and move forward, or kind of get better in alignment. But I think it's more powerful to focus on only one to begin with. And I think you'll see more momentum if you focus on just one area specifically for short term, and then maybe as you get that going, you build up some momentum, you might take on another goal or another area. So I like to say that on the front end. Don't get overwhelmed by taking an abundant life assessment and being like, oh man, I'm not where I want to be in any of these areas of my life. That's okay. It's just an awareness tool to see, maybe I want to bring some effort and focus on this area, physical health, for example. And so I encourage you to just, as you go through this exercise, absolutely be honest and upfront with yourself about where you are relative to where you want to go. But also don't get discouraged if you're not where you want to go in more areas of life or all of them. Just focus on one. And that's where you find the power to build momentum and bring all of your areas of focus in at some point. So I want to walk you through, we'll just start with the spiritual dimension. And again, these are just some of the questions that I created that help you just reflect on, am I where I want to be? So I use a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all true. I don't agree with this statement, or I can't say yes to this statement at all. I'm not where I want to be in this area of my life. And 5 being completely, totally satisfied with this area of my life. And this statement, completely true. I can answer it with complete confidence, 100%, this is me. So just a scale of 1 to 5 there. Of course, 3 would be in the middle, and you're just kind of floating along there. So the first question I just like to focus on this is, on a scale of 1 to 5, checking in with myself, can I say that I practice my spiritual practices and beliefs daily? And there again, no right or wrong answer, but if you were to ask yourself, check in with yourself relative to your spiritual beliefs and practices, are you being true to them on a daily basis? Whatever that looks like for you on a regular schedule. Can you consistently say, yeah, I am living this out, these priorities, these spiritual values, I'm living these out in my life every single day? 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all, and 5 being, yes, every day I'm very satisfied with this area. I'm in harmony with these spiritual values. You decide. There's no right or wrong answer here. Another question that I like to reflect on is, others can see evidence of my spiritual values in my daily walk. There again, just check in with yourself. Scale of 1 to 5. Are you where you want to be relative to that question? And if not, that might be an area that you want to focus on or make some changes in. Others see me as spiritually at peace. And that's an interesting question. You might not really know the answer to that. So you might have to ask somebody, ask some of your close friends, or some of your family, even check in with them and go, hey, how do you see me? Like, do you see me as having peace in my life and being in harmony with that from a spiritual perspective? Yes or no, scale of 1 to 5, just how close are you to saying that statement is me 100%? And, I'm just throwing out some examples for you of these questions. I think there's 10 in the whole assessment for this dimension of life. So I'm not going to share all of those. Of course, if you want the rest of them, go download the assessment tool. But I'm just giving you some examples here so that you can kind of do a mini check-in of yourself, even if you don't want to go download the worksheet. But just, knowing those couple of questions there just to guide you in reflection. And then last but not least, how does this compare with where I want to be? Right? If maybe you gave yourself 3s in all areas of those 3 questions, that might be very comfortable for you. And then just ask yourself, is that where I want to be? There again, if the answer is no, I'm not satisfied with this area of my life, I want to make some changes there, that's okay. That's good. In fact, that's very good and very healthy. If you just say, hey, I'm not where I want to be, but I recognize that. Now let me go make some changes. So let's move on. Let's talk about the what I like to call mental, emotional, or the personal growth area of life, right? Your headspace. First question, I have a personal growth and development plan. Now, when I say that, that doesn't have to be a very formal thing, but it could be. I remember hearing John Maxwell speak, and he was talking about very early in his journey, he had an opportunity to have a conversation with a mentor, and I don't remember the mentor's name. But it's interesting when John Maxwell tells the story. He said, I think he met him over lunch. He said, I sat down with him and I was expecting, wisdom to come out of him. And he just asked me this one question. He said, John, do you have a personal growth and development plan? And if you've ever heard John Maxwell speak, he brings a lot of valid humor into his presentations. And he talks about, I kind of sputtered and stuttered and I wanted to say yes. And I wanted to circle around and try to navigate and sidestep the question. And finally, I just had to say, no, I don't have a personal growth and development plan. And so then he talks about, from then on, he went out and I think he went out and bought one. But from then on, he's been very intentional with his growth. And of course, you can see that reflected in his leadership journey, in his writing books and speaking. Obviously, he's been very intentional with that since that time, since that mentor asked him that question. So it doesn't have to be a formal, strategic plan divided by quarter. It could be. If that is your thing and you like to just set every single goal down in writing, then go for it. Absolutely. It could be just as simple as a growth plan could be being intentional with a regular basis or regular schedule of how you grow. It might be that you have joined a coaching program, a personal growth coaching program, so that you've got a coach and accountability partner. You might be joining a program like I do some regular 12-week coaching programs for women who want to set some short-term goals in perspective of their long-term growth. And that's a way to be intentional with your growth, right? There's lots of different ways. For my own particular growth, a lot of my growth plan is I am very intentional about my reading. I read 50 nonfiction books every year, because I know if I just get one nugget from every book, then I'll be 50 nuggets richer at the end of the year. So there again, I don't necessarily think, oh, I'm going to grow this much by the end of 2021, but rather I focus on the things that help me grow. Reading is a great way to do that for me. Podcasts, leadership conferences, events, workshops, coaching. There's so many different ways to grow. But what I'm saying here is on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being no, I've never even heard of a personal growth plan, to 5, yes, I'm very intentional with my personal growth plan and I'm living it out. Just an awareness tool to say, do I have a plan for growth? Because just like any area of our life, if we don't plan and prepare to be successful, the odds of us ending up accidentally getting to where we want to go in life are pretty minimal, right? Nobody ever gets to the top of Mount Everest by themselves or by accident, I should say. So another question to reflect on in this area is, I know what my values are. Scale of 1 to 5. Have you thought about your values? What your values are, what's most important to you, because that's going to help you drive your decision making and your priorities. For example, a big part of my values, or one of my top values, is obviously commitment to health and wellness. So it doesn't mean I'm perfect. I totally had a piece of key lime, or maybe it was Persian lime pie over the weekend after my long run. And sure, there's some sugar in that, and definitely an indulgence. I don't sit down and have a piece of pie every day, but it doesn't mean we have to be perfect. But recognizing our values helps us make those daily decisions. So because health is one of my top values, I'm intentional about it. Exercise and eating well the majority of the time. Again, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for improvement. And I've made some strides in that this year, particularly. And then last question I want to share with you just in this area is, do I say no to things that are not in alignment with my values? On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being I never say no to things that are not in alignment, or 5 being I'm pretty good about saying no to opportunities or things that aren't in alignment with my values. Another example of how that could live out is maybe you have identified family as one of your top priorities in your values, but you're working all the time, 80 hours a week, and you never have time for your family, right? That would be a reflection of you're not committed to that value, because you can tell what's really important to someone by how they spend their time and how they spend their money, their checkbook, their calendar, and their conversation. What they talk about are going to be three ways that you can tell what's really a priority in that person's life. Physical dimension. You can ask yourself, just reflect on questions that I like to think about. I drink water instead of soda or sugary beverages or juice most of the time. I was teaching a session on Monday for a group of young women, and that's something that I'm privileged to be able to do fairly regularly when we're not traveling and speaking. But here locally in the community, I'm able to go and mentor and teach to a regular group of young women. And one of them was just sharing. She was like, you know what? I don't drink anything but water. She's like, I do not drink any sodas, nothing, like no lemonade, no, not. She's like, I just drink water. And I was so impressed by her level of maturity to say, you know what? I drink water most of the time. Like she's identified that that's a very healthy thing for her. And she's doing it. She's carrying it out. So if I were to ask her this question, she would be a 5 in this area of, she's already identified water is very healthy. I am not going to drink all of the other things that might kind of taste good, but they don't really help my body, right? So she's drinking more water. Questions like, I'm doing some cardiovascular exercise at least 3 times a week. Your heart is the most important muscle in your body. The most important, right? Your heart has to keep beating. You want to keep that heart healthy. And the only way you can exercise the heart is to exercise some of the larger muscles that gets your heart rate up, that gets you out of breath, that helps your heart beat faster. And that's the way to exercise the heart. But you got to do it. It doesn't happen just sitting on the couch watching Netflix, right? You actually have to get out and do some, it doesn't have to be extremely vigorous or arduous. You can just do some really good fast walking. That's something almost everybody can do, is just get out and walk. But that'll help you get your heart rate up. It'll also help you strengthen some of your other muscles, but so important for that heart to keep beating. Now, maybe you're a Zumba person, or maybe you're a runner or a cyclist. There's so many different ways. Figure out the one that works for you, right? There are also some similar questions to reflect on, like I do some strength work or flexibility. I'm stretching. I do a little bit of strength, picking up heavier things to help my muscles and my bone mass improve. So there again, there's no right or wrong answer here. You're not looking for perfection, just an awareness tool to check in with yourself and go, yeah, I'm not where I want to be in this area of life. Let me make some changes. Just helping you be intentional. And I get enough sleep. Last question for this area of dimension of health. And this is one for me that I have, especially over the years, this has been an area of improvement for me many times in my life. And, I'm a task-oriented person. I'm driven. I like to accomplish. I tend to, especially in the past, I tend to just push sleep to the back burner and say, you know what, I'll sleep later. Let me get this done. I remember I was working full time, and I was teaching group fitness, and I was teaching quite a few classes every week on top of working my full-time job. And I was finishing up my MBA. And that's right about the time that Mac was getting ready to transition from his consulting and process improvement to more of leadership development. And so I was trying to also help him with some things that would help him grow the business. And I remember just taking intentionally a look at my calendar and my schedule and going, you know what, if I only sleep from 10 to 4 a.m., from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., that's 6 hours a night. But if I do that just 4 nights a week, that's going to give me an entire 8 hours extra in my week. That's almost a whole day worth of work, right? And I remember making that decision on purpose because I'd put a lot of things on my plate, a lot of projects and a lot going on intentionally, and recognizing that something had to be less of a priority during that period. And so it was an intentional decision. And I'm not saying it was the wrong one for a time. Because here's the thing, when we get out of balance, particularly with our health. When we get too far out of balance for too long, we're going to have to pay the consequences later on. And I remember that year because I looked back at the end of that year and I'm like, yes, I slept less and I got more things done. But I don't think I've ever had a health year where my health just suffered like it did that year. I had the flu like twice. I got several colds and sinus infections. I had a problem with some tendonitis and just all kind of little things that just flared up. And I can really track that back to I was neglecting an area of sleep and there were some consequences, right? And that's all that really this comes down to is when we want to become the best version of ourselves, it's important to be intentional because when we are not intentional, there's always a drawback to that. And, obviously that played out in my not getting enough sleep. I'm usually doing pretty good these days. I might not get enough sleep for 1 or 2 nights, but I'm really good about making that up and getting back on a regular schedule nowadays, just because I know how important it is. So, and then, just reflecting, are you where you want to be in that area of life? So, last dimension I want to talk about in this podcast episode is the social, relational dimension of life. And a couple of things to think about here on a scale of 1 to 5. All of my friendships and relationships are positive influences in my life. Scale of 1 to 5. Could you be in complete agreement with that? Most people can't. And it's interesting because a lot of times we know when a relationship or a friendship isn't great for us, but we're not willing to minimize that. And it's hard to do because if you care about people or people in your life that you've cared about, sometimes they're not good for you to be around. And it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean you can't love them anyway. It just means you're going a different direction than they are in life. And so you're not going to spend a lot of time with that person. And, there again, it doesn't mean that you're better than anybody or that you don't care about them. You've just recognized that where you're headed in life is totally different than where they're headed in life. You're going different directions. You can't ride in the same car together and both get there. So make sure that you're riding in your car, respective to your relationships, your friendships, the people that you surround yourself with. Um, and then, a couple of questions to think about. I'm living up to commitments that I make to myself and to others with integrity. This is a big one for me, because I have so many experiences with people, particularly people who reach out to me and want to have a conversation or want to have a conversation around having me on their podcast or things like that. I encounter, obviously, I spend a lot of time on social media connecting with people, and that's not a bad thing. But I can't tell you how many times someone has made an appointment to have a phone call or a Zoom or, something like that. And then I get on at the appointed time and they don't show up or they don't call. And that just shows me that they're not making commitments out of integrity. And it absolutely decreases their influence with me. Um, that's important to think about is, are we able to make the commitments that we make with integrity, and do we keep them? Because when we make them and live up to them, we're increasing our influence and building trust, and if we don't, then we're taking it down. And a lot of times with people, it's the little things that end up being big things. So if you can't make a commitment with 100% certainty and integrity that you are going to live up to that commitment, don't make the commitment. Right? I would much rather say someone says, "Oh, I think I'm going to call you, blah, 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 blah," than, "Oh, I'm going to call you at 12 o'clock," and then they don't call. And then that tells me that either our conversation wasn't a priority in their world, in which case they're probably not a person I want to spend a lot of time with, or B, they weren't committed to the commitment they made. So they don't have the integrity to live up to that, in which case they're probably not a person I want to spend a lot of time with. Doesn't mean they're bad people. Doesn't mean something didn't come up. Sometimes that happens. We all know that. But I'm just encouraging you to reflect on, in your social world, are you able to live up to the commitments that you are making? Um, last question probably to reflect on in this area is others would describe me as positive. Scale of 1 to 5. And this also might be a question that you might want to ask for some feedback from other people in your life. Do they describe you as a positive person? Or would they describe you as a negative person? It might be interesting to ask and see what kind of feedback or responses you get. It might be situational. You might ask somebody at work and they say, "Oh, you're always positive except on Mondays." And then you might ask your family and they're like, "Oh, you're always positive." And that would let you know sometimes it's situational for you at work. There's something that you're struggling with that's not allowing you to, or keeping you back from being positive. So, and then just reflect on, how does this measure up with where I want to be in my life? No right or wrong answers here. I'm going to end with a quote and just leave this quote with you. James Allen says, "We are anxious to improve our circumstances, but we are unwilling to improve ourselves, and we therefore remain bound." Until next time.